Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Jeremy Sutton, host of the Daily Self-Publishing Podcast, and I'm here with an amazing guy, George Stevens. He is the owner of G Sharp Design LLC. He is a book cover formatter, designer. He's just an amazing guy. We're going to get into talking about book covers that sell and all that cool stuff tonight. So, George, thank you so much for joining me. It's such a pleasure talking to you.
It's awesome to be here, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So George and I met a few months ago, and I guess last year at some point, and he's been doing all my book covers for me for the last several months, and we've just had some amazing, um, work together. And so just wanted to bring you on tonight, George, and talk about, cover design, what we should look for and things like that. But first, I'd love for you to just talk about, how you got into cover design, things like that, why it's a passion of yours.
Yeah, well, I started my graphic design career, if you will, back in high school. My high school newspaper staff, right? So we had big high school, big staff, and just kind of started digging around on a computer one day and, discovered what was called PageMaker then. It's now called InDesign. But just kind of started tweaking with that program. And, a couple years later, I was editor-in-chief of that newspaper staff and just kind of found a niche, found kind of a joy for doing like layout design, that sort of thing. So I ended up going to school for journalism with focus on graphic design. And when I graduated, I wanted to do something that was kind of more practical, still, graphic forward, still a graphic design track, but I didn't necessarily want it to get into journalism. I didn't want to get into something, I guess, too artsy. I wanted it to be practical. And I found this great opportunity with a startup entrepreneurial publishing house, which I didn't even know what that was at the time. I knew what a publishing house was, but it sounded like a pretty cool career for like a newbie designer. So I signed on, and it was a startup, very definitively. My first day of work, they sat me down and gave me a phone number and said, call this guy who needs a book cover, that kind of thing. I'd never designed a book cover before, but they just said, kind of go for it. And thankfully I kind of thrived in that atmosphere. Fast forward, almost 12 years later, that company had ballooned to over 80 people. And I was the creative director of the publishing department. And, it was a real joy to be along for that growth curve. Just a real kind of unique experience to watch a company and be a part of a company growing to that degree.
Right.
And, going from what really felt like a kind of a ticky-tack little operation to a really thriving one. But of course, I always wanted to work for myself from the word go. And I've worked with entrepreneurs for, 10, 11 years. And it was like, man, I'm watching these people do it. I want to go do it. Right. So my company was super gracious about it. I had a good moment in my life when it was like, this is the right time to do this. So back in 2019, I exited that company, and they were, by the way, my first client. They sent me work right out the gates, which was a real nice vote of confidence. But since then, I've been doing, book design, branding work, event design, all kinds of things, a lot of music-based stuff. As you can see, I'm a musician as well. So, but in the last few weeks or a few months, really, I recognize that my real passion is book design. That's my background, right? And it's what I feel, not only the most comfortable doing, but I really enjoy working with the clientele. I love self-publishing authors specifically. They're just interesting people, as you know. And I love being a part of, bringing their story to life. And I just have a lot of admiration for those people. And so I've recently pivoted my practice, G Sharp, to just being at least kind of the storefront is just kind of a book design shop. And I'm really hoping to just lean hard into that. And, thankfully meeting you was a big part of that decision. And so far it's been good. I'm very, very busy with books, which is how I like it to be.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love it. I've told you this a couple of times. I've told other people in the last few weeks. I really feel like you're kind of the cornerstone of what I'm doing with my business with Book Boss Publishing, because you've been just so gracious and have introduced me to Nate Best, who does the editing, and Wesley Strickland, who does ebook formatting, and just so many other amazing people. So it's been funny. I haven't really had to go out and interview and find a whole lot of people, because everybody you've sent me to has just been an amazing human being. And I'm like, okay, yes, let's go. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Right. I just like good people working together, and it always, the results are there always.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I want to talk to you about, our entrepreneurial desires and things like that, but we'll do that another time
Sure.
I'm going to do another interview with you in a couple of weeks. But let's talk about book covers. So first off, I want you to tell us, why is it not okay to design your own book cover?
uh, well, legally, it's completely fine if you want to design your book cover. There's nothing saying you can't.
Right.
But book design is. I think that there is a perception issue with graphic design in general. So this is kind of a larger conversation here, but I'll pull it back in. That graphic design is this kind of it's kind of like fun hobby, right? Which it is. It totally can be. But I also think you have to understand that like there's a very kind of homogenized view of graphic design. Everybody thinks every graphic designer is kind of the same, and they're all just kind of futzing around in Photoshop. But I think what people need to recognize when it comes to book design, and really any design, whatever you're trying to do, there are specialists, right? Just like in any field, just like in PT or whatever service field, there are going to be specialists who focus on a particular thing and drill down and get really, really good at it. Okay. So I guess my first point here is that graphic design is something where there's kind of like a low barrier of entry. So like Jeremy, you could go download Photoshop tonight. Maybe you already have it.
Right.
And you could go open it up and kind of create something kind of cool, right? It's like going to be stimulating to you. And you're going to think like, oh man, I've got this, right? This is kind of fun. And it is. I get it. That's kind of how I got into it in the first place. But all that is to say, I think book design is a much more nuanced practice, right? And I think anybody can look at something that I hesitate to use the word amateur because I feel like that's dismissive, but somebody maybe who's more of a hobbyist,
right?
Their work next to a celebrated book designer, not including myself. I'm talking about somebody who's like the best in the game, right? And you can kind of tell, right? You can just kind of spy. One is a professional composition, and one is just kind of a fun thing, right? And the reason why I don't think you should do your own, especially in the nonfiction world, entrepreneurial world that we operate, is because your book design is the front door. It's of your credibility, right? So if somebody sees your book design or let's say you're trying to get booked for like a keynote speech somewhere, and they say, okay, great, send me some materials, and you send them a book design that you put together in MS Paint, or they might think, we're not exactly what we're looking for. But if they see one that you've invested in, you've gone through the process, you've obviously spent time and approached mindfully, those are the kind. Again, it's the first thing that anybody sees. Look, Jeremy, we've come a long way to society to where we don't judge a book by its cover in pretty much any arena except the one.
That's right.
We still judge books by their covers. So I do genuinely believe that there is a lot of value to having a professionally designed book, especially if you're trying to build your own credibility.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you get what you pay for. Absolutely. I've used before I started using you, I was using only Fiverr. And I remember, reaching out to you one day going, look, I'm done with Fiverr. I can't do that anymore. Like whatever you're charging, I'm willing to pay it. Let's just have good covers.
So nothing like hearing that, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like I shouldn't have led with that probably, but okay, go back now. No, I agree 100%. And I used to tell people, don't use all your don't be creative on your book cover. It needs to be, what your genre looks like and things like that. But now I just say, hey, don't even deal with it because, we need to have a professional that does this. And I started out. Go ahead, George. Go.
Well, I was going to say, and none of this is to say that you, the author, are not heavily involved in the book cover. In fact, I think one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of self-publishing authors make is they hand it off to somebody and then wash their hands clean, and they just say, like, let me know when it's done. I think, a great cover design is the result of a collaboration. It's an iterative process where a designer who understands how to kind of mind meld with an author. They work together. And they kind of like get to know each other. They establish this rapport to where that designer understands the goals, the message, the audience, the personality of that author, and all of those ingredients kind of make their way. They manifest themselves into that cover design, and it's kind of like a hard thing to explain. But having done hundreds and hundreds of books, like that's the formula. It should not be this kind of quick and hands-off process, which, to your point, Fiverr and a lot of these crowdsourcing platforms, I mean, look, they have a vested interest in kind of keeping you at an arm's length from your designer.
Yeah.
Because they don't want you getting to know each other and like saying, oh, let's go work off here. Like, we don't want to pay commission to them anymore. So, you know, I do actually use one of the crowdsourcing platforms, not Fiverr, but a different one. And I have the most frustrating experiences with it because, you know, I try to like set up a call and they slap me on the wrist. I'm saying, I'm trying to give your client here a great experience, but you don't even want me talking to them off of your platform. That's just not how great design happens in my mind.
No, 100%. I love that. And, you know, just as you're talking, I'm thinking about, you know, the questionnaire that you send all the authors that you work with. You know, it's very in depth. You know, you send me some covers you like. What's the idea behind the book? Things like that. Talk about, you know, why you do things like that a little bit more, George.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you work with me, one of the first things I do is send out this questionnaire. And the questionnaire is not me saying, tell me what you want on your book cover, right? I think if a designer ever asks you that, you might want to look for another one because that's not your job. The reason I send you that questionnaire, first of all, you know, I'm gathering some of the sort of foundational information. Like and that's just to have a record of it, right? One of the questions is like, what do you want your name to say on the cover, right? What is the exact title of your book? How, you know, what's the trim size of your book, things like that. But then there's also these kind of more abstract, maybe a strong word, but it is kind of like, tell me about your message. And there's one question buried in there that if I could only ask it would be the only one that I would ask, which is, when someone looks at your finished book cover, whatever it is, when somebody looks at it, what one word or phrase or feeling should enter their mind? And if I could only ask one question, that would be it, because I think that informs so much about the direction I will take. A great book cover should generate a response in a split second, right? It should have that immediate impact where it compels. And just by knowing if your answer is hope, or if your answer is like, you know, back pain relief, you know, whatever it is, that is super valuable to me as a designer, because I know what that kind of frontline instant message needs to be that your cover gets across.
Wow. I love that. You know, you just ruined my night's sleep now. I'm going to be thinking about that for when I send you my questionnaire, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I love that because, you know, books are meant to give people a transformation. We're not reading, you know. So today I left this morning and I had an Amazon box on my doorstep, and it was these two books. It's John Lee Dumas, The Common Path, The Uncommon Success, it just released, and then The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, and that's one that Josh Forty recommended a guy follow. But anyway, like, I was so excited, and I read 3 chapters of that book at lunch because it promises a transformation. You know, the common path to the uncommon life. So I love that you say, hey, what's the feeling that we're going to get out of this? Amazing stuff. George, talk about, what do you look for in a cover that's going to be successful, that says, you know, to the reader, hey, pick me up. This is professional. It was done well.
Yeah. So that's like a dig deep kind of question. That's like almost asking a designer, like, what's the meaning of life? You know, like, we could sit around a campfire and have some whiskey and discuss that in depth and maybe never come to a concrete answer, but we'd have a lot of fun talking about it. But I mean, I think, you know, look, you could get into the fundamentals of design. You know, I would, as a designer, I'm going to look for things, you know, the way anybody who's in a particular business, they have an eye for that business, right? So like, I'm driving by billboards and I'm, you know, looking at the letter spacing, the kerning, and the, you know, things like that, right? So there are those kind of things. I mean, for the consumer, they're not evaluating it consciously, right? I think if there's one word that I would assign to any successful book cover, I think it would be enduring. You know, I think it is that styles come and go, but a great cover will look great in 5 years, will look great in 25 years, will look great in 50 years. And you could probably say that about any design. Logos, very famously, Coca-Cola hasn't changed their logo in 130 years or something like that. Like, that is an enduring design. And the same goes for a successful book cover. It will endure. And the opposite goes for a not so successful book cover. I believe that, like, a cover that is not enduring is going to look, I guess the opposite of enduring would be like ephemeral. Like, it looks like something that you might just kind of chuck. It might look like a brochure or a book cover is not like a social media graphic that you're going to look at and then it's just going to disappear and you'll never see it again. A book cover has to kind of stand the test of time. So I think, I know that's difficult. That's a subjective thing to define, but I do think, I also think that you could put an enduring cover and a non-enduring cover next to each other, and you can probably say which one's enduring, and you'd probably be able to recognize it. So how do you accomplish that? Well, that was what I talked about earlier is finding that partner in design, who you can really develop this understanding with, this rapport with, who gets you and who themselves is, equipped as a designer, is experienced, knows how to do the thing that they're being hired to do, but also has that kind of next level of understanding of how to execute this at a high level. And I define that as it's all about getting to know that person and understanding what they're trying to do and their goals and all those things I talked about. And then that will translate it to the drawing board and ultimately result in great design.
Man, you're right. We did need a drink for that one. So basically, you're saying you know it when you see it.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Thanks for being succinct, Jeremy. I think that is a very succinct way to put it. Of course, I think you could also, accuse me of copping out if I gave that answer. So I had to be a little more, expansive on it. But I do think that it kind of does boil down to that. Is I think in this day and age, we are all assaulted by marketing, by design. We're constantly seeing it, and I think that the cream rises to the top typically, right? So and generally speaking, the market will speak for itself. The best work does tend to get noticed.
Absolutely, yeah. One of the questions wasn't necessarily going to ask you, but I just thought about it. I was looking at the top 100 books on Amazon last week, and I said, "Oh, I took a screenshot of them because the first 20 looked almost the same. They were like white with red letters or something like that." And I'm like, I need to ask George, why is this so appealing? And I noticed there's several books that you've designed that kind of are similar to that, that just kind of really make my eye pop. Why is that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that look, any design, one of the kind of fundamental elements of successful design is, what one of my professors used to call the CVI, Center of Visual Interest. So any design has to have one element that's going to jump out at you. A really good way to make an element jump out is high contrast colors, and heavy elements. So like a thick, bold red font on a flat white background is a great way to make that jump out. So I think in the kind of business airport reader, business book world, motivational, you do see a lot of that kind of boldness, a lot of that high contrast. There's not, you could look in the novel section, you're going to see something completely different, which is usually a little more artsy, frankly. It's maybe a little more abstract. I think, one of the important things about the kind of books that we do is that not only does it have to look good and evoke a feeling like we talked about, but it also has to propose value objectively. It has to essentially tell people what this book is about. And a lot of novels, that's not the case. You can get away with naming a novel some weird thing and people, that's okay. But for a book about I keep bringing up PT because it's your world, but physical therapy should probably be somewhere. Yeah, I mean, it should probably be somewhere in the subtitle. It needs to at least tell people that this is the direction that this book is going. This is the world that it's speaking to. So, yeah, I mean, kind of going back to what you asked, I just think there are prevailing trends in book design, and the most successful self-help book, you're going to see 200 others that look kind of like it because it has set as kind of a standard.
Yeah, absolutely. I just got Don Miller's new book, Business Made Simple, and I was doing my author summit last weekend, 2 weekends ago, and we talked about it. And it has an amazing format. He has a video for every chapter, and John Lee Dumas' book, same way. I just looked at it today, and all these companion things, and so you're talking about all these business books kind of copy the successful ones, and I've already had multiple people say, "Yeah, I'm going to write my book exactly like that," because it just makes sense.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's something to be said for kind of riding a wave, but I do also think that one of the distinguishing, well, I just kind of blew the ending there. One of the defining factors of a successful design is that it has to be distinct. It can't be the exact same. There has to be something about it that separates it from every other design. And so, yeah, like it's cool if we want to do a cover that is, you know, basically good to great, you know, but we've got to find what's going to make your book. And we're not just going to like take good to great and then slap it on your cover and change the words. We got to make this book is definitively, every book is different, and we need to make it about you. And we're going to find what we need to do to accomplish that.
Yeah, man, I love that. It has to be personal, and it has to say Jeremy on it, or George, or whoever. I love that.
Exactly. It has to reflect your personality as well.
That's great. You know, one of my authors, David Bailiff, who's on this live, ever talking about it, we put his face on the cover, and it was actually one I designed, and I do like it, but I would love to have you redesign it. But it's funny because all of his chapter titles are, you know, if you're not first, you're last, act like Roger Federer, famicity, and just these crazy words that he uses. But his personality is all over it, and I love that about it because when you get the book, you get him. So
sure, yeah, and you got to think, you know, he's essentially the product, right? I mean, I would imagine he is trying to market himself in some capacity, whether it's getting booked as a speaker or something like that. And so it's critical, especially in the book like that your personality does come through in the design, and of course in the editorial, the voice of the manuscript and everything. But the design is just as important in my mind because again, it's that front door.
Okay, I want to switch gears just a little bit, George. And so you're amazing cover design, but you also do an outstanding job formatting the inside of the book. And the first one I saw that you ever did was amazing, and that was one of the reasons why I knew I had to get you working with me. So talk about how important it is not to just MS Word, you know, Microsoft Word, throw it on Amazon. What makes it important to do the inside as well? Yeah,
well, I mean, I think it kind of boils down to you know, a cohesiveness, a sense of cohesiveness that it will that the cover establishes, and you want that to be carried out through the interior layout. I mean, look, reading a book is an experience. I mean, it's in the same way that like a restaurant is designed deliberately, or very famously, websites are designed with user experience in mind, UX. Books are no different. You want to feel like you're in a little world of your own when you're reading that book. And it isn't heavy-handed, you know. It could just be the font treatment or the spacing, you know, a line spacing that's a little more comfortable than, you know, just a slightly tighter one. Things like that. And, you know, that's where an experienced formatter comes into play, because they understand, you know, how these decisions are going to impact the user experience. So, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it is, you know, something that is, if not an afterthought, sometimes authors in the self-publishing realm just don't know that that's an important piece of the puzzle. And I get that, you know. One of my goals in kind of pivoting my business is to like educate people, you know, even if you don't work with me, I just want you to know these things because I want your book to be better. So if you approach the layout as mindfully as you approach the cover, and you recognize that those things are linked, you know, it's going to result in a much better product. I think Sharon Drulow, who we both know, and I did her book design. Hers is a great example of a book that I think that just feels, you know, when you go through that book from the front cover to the back cover to every page and the title pages of the chapter. I mean, it just feels like you're having, you know, a great experience. And as somebody who has been referencing that book every day for the past 2 months, I can tell you you know, it's weird to be using one of the books I designed, but that experience matters. It really does.
Yeah. So Sharon wrote one on parenting and milestones. So George has been soaking it up now. I love that. You know, that book sold me 100% on you, because I looked at it and I said, you know, this is a self-published book, but it looks just like something that I bought at Barnes and Noble or Amazon or whatever. It looked 100% professional. And that's when I knew you had something special, and I had to like be a part of it. So
yeah, I love it's that, funny, Jeremy, when people say, talk to me, a lot of the first thing I hear is, I don't want my book to look self-published, you know?
Yeah.
And I think I understand where they're coming from, but isn't it funny that I think we all recognize self-publishing as this just incredible, like modern wonder of the world. And yet we're like, don't make it look self-published. So it's almost like there's clearly a perception issue in terms of like design in the self-publishing community. So, you know, it would be when I retire someday, when you and I are out on a yacht somewhere, you know, just like,
that's right,
remembering the old days. If the self-publishing world has kind of just like, if that that like connection, the connotation of like, don't make it look self-published is gone, I will feel like I have succeeded on some level. Like, I think self-publishing authors have access to excellent high level design, the same as any author does. And that's something I want people to understand.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's amazing. I talk to people every week that, we talk about joining, getting on with Book Boss Publishing, getting their book done. And they're like, I want this to be professional. I'm like, I'm telling you, we've got, editors, copywriters, proofreaders, cover design. This is done professionally. So you can absolutely, I love what you said. It's self-publishing doesn't have to look self-published at all.
Exactly. It's not a consolation. It's not like, well, I couldn't get in with the big boys, so I'm going to do it. It makes more sense for a lot of people to self-publish. And you shouldn't have to settle on your services because of that. And I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing, because, it's people need that. People need an avenue for it, and they need the right help.
Yeah, I just got this John Lee Dumas book that we talked about. This is his first traditionally published book. Mm-hmm. His other books were self-published, and he even says in this book, one of his journals, he made about $385,000 on the first day or first month that he published it as a journal and self-published. So, right. I mean, that's not going to be the norm for everybody.
Sure.
But now he's traditional published, so it's not a consolation. It's a great way to go. Man, George, you've been laying down the fire. I feel like you need to pull down a mandolin or something behind you and start playing.
Those are all for show. I don't know how to use any of those.
Okay, that's what I thought. I can't play anything at all. So, George, if last few seconds, I want to get you out of here so I can get you back to your wife and baby. What would you say to somebody that's thinking about doing the book cover themselves, and why should they really just kind of hone in on the last few seconds? Why should they find somebody to help them design their book that knows what they're doing?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of folks, they'll either design it themselves or they'll go, a path of least resistance, right? They'll find some kind of quick and easy way to do it. And I think the reason that happens a lot is because there's this fatigue that's kicked in. You've gone through this whole process of publishing. But that's the very reason I think that you need to kind of gather some steam and, really dedicate yourself to this last part of the process. I mean, look, this is your life's work. For a lot of people, it might be their only book that they ever publish. It might be.
Sure.
They might have spent a year writing it. They've probably gone through all these editorial phases. Never mind the career that you had to lead up to writing this book. And to me, it's just a tragedy to just kind of, let's just get done with this design and get it out. I think we just need to remember, again, I keep saying it, but it is the first impression. It could be the difference between you being viewed as a resource, a super credible resource, somebody who could look. I think a well-designed book can make its money back. So it's or any book design. So it's hey, put in whatever you put into it, I think you will get back out of it. A lot of my clients, one new client for them or one speaking engagement will pay for the entire publishing process. So for them, they understand it's really worth putting some, investing in. But I also think the last thing I'll say is don't misconstrue cost with value. Okay. So high cost and high value are often correlated. I think we all recognize that, right? So sure. I think, just because this guy's charging $100 and this guy's charging $1,000, it's not apples to apples always. Generally speaking, I believe the $1,000, service provider is going to be bringing far more than 10 times the value of the $100 service provider. I mean, that's kind of a simple, basic principle of just the marketplace, but I think it applies to design as much as anywhere else. And it would warm my heart if people would kind of embrace that, because, whether you work with me or anybody else, as long as you approach it mindfully, I think you can get some really great things out of this process.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to double down on something you said as people saying, they're going to view you as a resource by looking at your book. But I want to say people can either view you as a resource, as a small resource, or the authority. And that book cover can make the difference in a resource and an authority.
Right. And look, a bad book cover could have the opposite effect. It could have a repelling effect. I mean, like I said earlier, if your book looks too cheap and just kind of thrown together, somebody who might be might stand to be a client won't see through that, and they won't get to the inside and the inside. They'll just say like, wow, this kind of looks amateurish, and I don't know if this is the caliber of person I want to work with, really. So you need to just kind of consider, put your best foot forward. It will, there is, I think, a lot of value to working with just like tenured publishing professionals. I just really believe that.
I agree. After working with Fiverr and then working with you, I will 1,000,000% agree with that, and yeah, do it. George, man, thank you so much. I agreed to get you out of here in 30 minutes, and you ended on that note, and I'm gonna let us go with that. So I appreciate you so much, man.
All right, thanks, man. I appreciate you having me.
Hey, George, last thing. I know I can do this, but tell everybody where to find you if they want to reach out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my website is gsharpmajor.com. It's like the music key, gsharpmajor.com. And, you can find my work there. You can contact me. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram and all the things. Go on LinkedIn like once every month. So maybe I'll see you there. But yeah, gsharpmajor.com. It's G Sharp Design is the name of the practice. So give me a shout. I'd love to chat with you.
Perfect. We'll see you later, brother.
All right. Take care, Jeremy.